you back up there. Shrink that. And let's wait for YouTube to finish loading. Any moment. Any moment. Still waiting. Still waiting. Got up there. Well, look, it says it's done. Let's see if it does it. You know, I just want to teach Torah. I don't want to have to fight the technology every month when they change things. All right, my apologies to those who are on YouTube. Zoom decided to update their software and decided to hide lots of different pieces of the software. So we're back up and running now, but that could have been smoother, and such is life. Let me go ahead and make sure that everything is set. And then we can actually get to Torah, you know, the reason that we are here. All right, and that one we can also hide. There we go. Okay, you know, I love technology. I love what it does. I don't like when technicians change things that don't actually improve anything. It seems a little bit of an unnecessary delay. So let's get down to work because we've got 6 minutes to try and make up from what I had scheduled. So we are in the book of Deuteronomy, the book of Devarim, and we are going through Moses's great recap of everything that has happened so far. And that, clicked on the wrong button. And that means that we need to hear. Let's see if you could actually click on the things that I want. Need to make sure, wait, I need to make sure that everything was working. Got a little worried there for just a second. Okay. And Moses is going through a recap, and the recap is amazingly insightful because through different wording or changes or additions or subtractions, we are able to glean not only more about what happened during the events of the recap, but also the intention, both Moses's intention as well as, of course, God's, and in some circumstances, the nation's. So it may feel like an unnecessary repetition of events from before, but trust me, the retelling of a story is as critical as the story, because every story is a retold story. So the second version we get is very important too. Let's dive into our section, which is going to begin just with the last sentence of chapter 1, but mostly focused on the beginning of chapter 2. And Moses is talking about our journey towards Israel. So you stayed in Kadesh for many days, like the days you had stayed there before. And we faced about and marched into the wilderness. Remember, wilderness, midbar, often translated as desert. It's just the area that's uninhabited. We marched into the wilderness by the Reed Sea route. As Adonai had spoken to me, we circled around the highlands of Seir for many days, years, for a long time. Yamim Rabin, which Fox is translating as days and years. It's a long time. Now, that is setting the stage for where we are in our story. We are approaching the land of Israel, and we are making a detour around the land of Seir, Har Seir. Now, Har Seir, these highlands, the Mount of Seir, is of course associated with Esau. And Esau was the brother of Jacob. And as you may know, they didn't get along so well. But nonetheless, Esau was given the land of Seir, and that is the land that we are now skirting. And you may be thinking to yourself, and I'm sure the Israelites were as well, why are we skirting the land of Seir? It seems like a very long way to go out of our way, rather than going through the land of our kin. Well, we're going to hear more about that here in the retelling. We obviously heard about this in Bamidbar, but we need to hear about it in the retelling. Then Adonai said to me, saying, enough for you circling around these highlands, face about northward, meaning you've gone far enough to the east. Now head north, meaning you have passed the border of Seir, and now you can head north and pass them on the north side, cut back to the west. You will then be on the east bank of the Jordan, what we would now call the nation of Jordan, and then you'll be able to enter into the land of Israel. Well, The nation will be able to enter the land. Moses famously does not. So everybody hopefully has that geography. We have gone around Seir. Now we are heading north, and then eventually we are going to cut across. And as for the people, command them, saying, you are about to cross the territory of your brothers, the children of Esau, who are settled in Seir. Though they are afraid of you, take exceeding care. So the people are saying, well, we're right on the border of our brother, of Esau. This looks like it's great. And yet we are also reminded that brothers we may be in ancestry, but nonetheless, at the moment, they are afraid. At the moment, the people of Seir are afraid of us. Why? Well, because we are a rather large group of people, and we are heading in their direction. That kind of puts people on edge. And then the command comes, do not stir yourselves up against them, for I will not give you of their land so much as a sole of a foot can tread on. For as a possession to Esau, I gave the highlands of Seir. So God is saying through Moses that as much as we may wish to go to battle, because we seem to be in the dominant position, they are afraid of us, and that's a huge issue in ancient military strategy. The time is ripe for us to go ahead. We could conquer this land. God is saying no, that God is not allocating that land to us. Esau has a possession that is also given by God, and it is what they've got now, and we are to leave it alone. That even if we were to go in, just the amount of space that's under your shoe, just that tiny little, few square inches, no, God would not even grant us that amount of land from the possession of Esau. It belongs to that nation. Therefore, food you may market from them for silver that you may eat, and also water you may drink from them for silver that you may drink. Meaning that if you go through their land, then you can buy food and you can buy water. Now, why is this an important statement? Well, let's understand historically, most armies did not have a massive logistical supply chain like most modern armies do. Historically, most armies had what they could carry on their back and some wagons with supplies, but they were expected to supplement, if not live entirely, off the land. And off the land doesn't mean they were out just picking berries. It meant either extorting or capturing the resources of the local population. And that might happen to your own population. It might happen, or it might even be more common to happen when you are in a foreign country. And so armies were like plagues of locusts. They would come through, they would eat, and even if they didn't kill the citizenry, they would still leave them on the edge of starvation, if not worse. And here God is saying that although you would go through it, and although I won't give you the land, you should also recognize you don't have the right to steal their produce. You don't have the right to steal their food. If you want their food, buy it. If you want water, buy it. Now, I'm sure some of you are scratching your head saying, wait a minute, but why would we? We've got manna. We've got water that's ever flowing in support of us. So why would we be buying food? I mean, if my pantry's full, why am I going to buy more? I can just walk through their territory, get to the other side, and be well fed in the process without causing any trouble. Well, we're going to come back to that in our commentary. But for the moment, that is the sort of general surface reading of the text. That if we go into that land, anything we wish we have to buy, we are not allowed to take, even though it was normal operating procedure for all armies of the ancient world to live off the land. We are being expressly forbidden not to. Again, we often know what the norm was by the mitzvot, by the commandments that God gives us to prevent us from behaving as normal. We are not supposed to behave in the average way. We are supposed to do better than that. And this is one of those examples. For Adonai, your God, has blessed you in all the works of your hands. He has known your travels in this great wilderness. These 40 years your God is with you. You have not lacked a thing. Again, we're getting a reminder here that we have been supported by God for 40 years. So we can go for a little bit longer without having to take anything from the people of Esau's descendants. But there might be another layer here as well, trying to remind us that as we have been blessed, we also need to recognize that others have been blessed, that they have a right to what they have, we have a right to what we have, and we should not feel like we are in desperate straits to take from others. Oftentimes it is that feeling of scarcity, that feeling of if I don't take more, even if I have a lot now, but if I don't take more, then eventually I may run out. And God is trying to remind us that for 40 years, we've never run out, even though we didn't even have land to support us. So all the more so as we come into the land of Israel, we should have more confidence and feelings of assurance. Moving on just a little bit more. So we crossed on by way, away from our brothers, the children of Esau, who are settled in Seir, away from the route of the plain, from Elat and Etzion Geber, and we faced about and crossed the route of the wilderness of Moab. So it turns out that the people of Seir did not want us to go through, and so we did, in fact, have to detour. Maybe again thinking to yourself, but wait a minute, surely we could have guessed they wouldn't let us through, or at the very least, God would have known we weren't going to go through. Why go through all the trouble of you have to buy, you have to, be respectful, don't put your foot up, don't think you can even take the foot worth of land. Why give us all of those instructions if in the end of the day we're just going to detour around them altogether? That hold on to as a thought for our commentary. So now we are going up to Moab. Well, that has another question. Verse 9. Adonai said to me, do not harass Moab. Do not stir yourself up against them in battle, for I will not give you any of their land as a possession. For to the children of Lot I have given Ar as a possession. So we get into Moab and we are coming that way. And again, we are reminded this is another of the family of Abraham from Lot. And thus they have been given this land by God as well. And we have no claim against it, and we have no right to take it from them. And so we will not be allowed to engage them in battle. Well, engage them in an offensive battle. Unfortunately, when we are actually attacked, we are allowed to defend ourselves, but we are not allowed to go against them in the normal way of the ancient world, which is if you're stronger, attack them. Instead, we are supposed to treat them as off limits unless they actually attack us. Now, the retelling continues on there, but we're going to go ahead and jump into our commentary. As I said, thanks to technology, we lost a little bit of time, and I want to make sure that we have a chance to actually discuss this. All right, not seeing any questions, so let's go ahead and dive in. So we're going to go back and focus initially on that question of buying food and buying water off the people of Seir, off the descendants of Esau. And Ibn Ezra is trying to work out this phrase of you shall purchase food of them. And he wants to know, is that a commandment, like we have to buy from them? No, this is an opportunity. That is to say, if they want to sell, that we are not allowed, we are not being commanded to buy from them. As we're going to see, that's a very important point. And more so, if we want something, they have to agree to allow us to have it. As we'll see from Ramban in just a second, the word consent is rather important here. Now you might be thinking, wait a minute, but how else would a market transaction work? If the seller doesn't want to sell, then what would the buyer do? Well, in the ancient world, if you were an army, you might, if you were being noble, go through a territory and, quote, buy all of their wheat, all of their produce, and give them a sack of money for their trouble, which may or may not be the correct amount of compensation. But unfortunately, most people that I know of are not able to eat money to sustain their life. So even if we were to think that we would be allowed to take and give them money, Ibn Ezra is telling us, no, you can only buy it if they want to sell. You can't just drop off, a few coins and call it good, even though they didn't want to sell in the first place because they were, looking forward to using that food to not starve. So Ibn Ezra lines up sort of the basic principle here that even that middle path, which would have been considered above and beyond the norm for the ancient world, would not be sufficient. We have to actually make sure that they are willing to sell something to us. And Ramban is going to drive that home even more clearly. If you should desire to eat of the fruit of their land, you should not take it from them except for the full price at their pleasure, meaning that they are willing to sell it to you. This being the sense of the word me'itam. You purchase it from them or of them, that is to say, with their consent. Also, you should not drink water of them at all except for money with their consent. Now, it's very important to remind ourselves that this is much easier, or should be much easier for us to observe, because at the time we have water aplenty and we have food aplenty through the man that God has been supporting us with. Were we to be in desperate straits, then we might have a more difficult situation. Life and death situations, unfortunately, will often change calculations. But in this place, we are being told this is the land of Seir. It belongs to the children of Asa. This is their food, their water. And if you really, really want something that they have, not that you need it, but if you want it, then you have to treat them exactly as you would anyone within your own community, within your family, which is to say, if they want to sell it, you pay the normal price, and then that's fine. Anything less than that is a form of exploitation, theft, or otherwise not behaving according to Torah. And indeed, Bamidbar Rabbah, the great Midrash collection, tries to draw some general etiquette lessons from this, not just lessons for this particular generation at this particular moment of crossing through this land, but in general, we can learn from this that the Torah teaches you etiquette. Etiquette, I know, has a bad connotation in modern English. It always sounds like, pinky out, drinking tea kind of nonsense. But etiquette here means proper behavior, like derech eretz, the general way that one should behave. The more pleasant form of that word in modern English would be manners, that this is how you should behave if you're going to be a decent person. So what does it teach? That one who goes to a land that is not his and has for his needs, meaning you have enough supplies for yourself, he should not eat from what is in his possession, but rather he should purchase from the storekeeper in order to benefit him. Wait a minute, hold on. Isn't that exactly the opposite what Ramban just said? Ramban and Ibn Ezra seem to say that it was all up to the local of whether they wanted to sell me or not. And this is telling me that I should go out of my way to buy from the storekeeper, even if I have plenty, like the Israelites did, that I should buy from them. What is this talking about? Well, it's those last three words that are so important in that sentence. To benefit him, meaning to benefit the local, non-Israelite in this case, who is at the store. That if you go through someone's territory, you should drop a little money in the local economy. That is polite to do so. And as it goes on to say, Moses said to him, the well accompanies us and we eat manna. Do not say that we are an imposition upon you. You will be earning income for yourself. So as the Midrash imagines Moses saying, look, we can feed ourselves and we can provide for our own water. So we're not going to drain anything from you, but we can drop cash. We can spend money as tourists, you might say, put that into your local economy, and that would be entirely up to you. We're willing to do so. We're not just trying to pass through. In fact, not only are we not going to harm you as we go through, we will benefit you as we go through. We are not just passing like ghosts in the night that don't touch anything in your community. We are going through, but only in a way that will positively affect you. We're not going to drain anything. We're only going to deposit. And someone who came from San Diego and now lives in Orlando, two very big tourist cities, I can tell you that tourists are an incredible boon to a local economy. People who come and visit a place, travel through a place, and spend money help the local economy immensely. It's like a free contribution to everything that goes on locally from people who are unlikely to benefit long term from what they have spent. the taxes go to support local things, and the tourists are not locals by definition. So it is an incredibly important and an incredibly valuable asset. So Moses is trying to explain Tourism 101 to the people of the ancient world. Moses said to them, meaning to the Israelites, loosen your purse strings, so they will not say, they were slaves, they are poor. Show them your wealth, and they will know that you did not lose because of enslavement. Reminding ourselves of the quote from Genesis of the promise God made to Abraham, afterward they will emerge with great wealth. And they, meaning the people of Seir or later Moab, they will know that you are lacking nothing, and it is not from your own that you are giving, as it is stated, for the Lord your God blessed you. These 40 years the Lord your God has been with you, you have lacked nothing, taking the quote from the passage that we read. So Moses is explaining that not only is this a great shot in the arm for the local economy, tourists are great business, but this is also a way of celebrating God. This is also a way of testifying that God has done an amazing thing. When we go and we are able to spend, then we are showing that we are not slaves, we are not destroyed, we have not been economically ravaged because of our enslavement. On the contrary, we have left Egypt perfectly capable of taking care of ourselves. And in fact, we are doing so well that we are not stingy, and we are absolutely willing to share that wealth with others around us and to be a benefit to them as well. And in the process, people will say, my God, quite literally, look what God has done for them. This is a people that have just left as slaves, and yet they don't come begging at the door. Instead, they come in a position to benefit us. That should be something that will open our arms to you. Now, unfortunately, as we know, both Seir as well as Moab were not taken in by that idea. They did not see the value of our tourist dollars, or shekels, excuse me, and as such, we have the way barred. But we're not done exploring our own internal reflections on this. As much as we can point out their mistakes, we also need to understand what we should learn in this process. So as we turn onto the next section, and I don't think I can get it onto, no, it's going to have to be a flip. I like to always leave it up on one screen if I can for the benefit of those watching, but this one looks like it's going to have to do a little scrolling when we get to the bottom. So Akedat Yitzchak wants to make a broader understanding about the history that we were facing, to help us understand what God was actually saying, and to make all the pieces make sense. As I said before, a surface reading can give us a general understanding of what God wanted, what Israel wanted, what Edom, which is the other term for the people of Seir, for the children of Esau, what they all wanted. But a deeper reading will help us understand each of the different lines, the pieces of the puzzle, much more clearly, and see both some interesting tidbits about the past, but also some important guidance for our own behavior. So we must make a distinction between God's reasons and Israel's motivations, meaning that God is God, and thus God does what God needs to do. But God also knows that Israel is, well, flesh and blood people. And as such, they are not always going to just say, God said it, we're going to do it. In fact, if anything we've learned over the last Torah portions of Bamidbar, we often do not snap to it when God tells us something. We often need more clarification, and sometimes we need at least a little extra guidance, or letting us do things our way so we see how they work out in order to come into line with what God wants. So Israel was very interested in avoiding a major detour around the land of Edom. Remember, they've been for 40 years. No one wants an additional roadblock at the last mile. It was an inconvenience, which, as we have seen in this chapter, resulted in many complaints. Therefore, God did not prevent the people from trying diplomacy. Moses brings the people up to the border and says, all right, everybody, we're going to go circle wide all the way around through the land to the east of Edom, and then we'll swing north, and then we'll swing west. And the people went, wait, why? And he says, well, this is what God said is going to work. And they went, wait, what? Can we at least try to talk to the people that live there and see if they'll let us through? And that is why God does not prevent the people from trying diplomacy. And of course, this is an incredibly important insight into our own moral instruction that you're right. Sometimes we're not going to get what we want through diplomacy, but that doesn't mean we don't start with diplomacy. We'll start with sending an emissary. We'll start with explaining exactly what we want and why it won't be a problem. But we have to be prepared for that also to fall apart. God, of course, knew of the futility of the exercise, and that is why all the reasons are listed that could have persuaded the Edomites to grant Israel's request. So the Torah is very clear of trying to work out. We're not going to try and take the land. We respect your claim of ownership. We will respect your property rights. If anything, will be of benefit to your local economy. We tried to make that as clear as possible so that it would be very, very enticing for the people of Seir to let us through. However, we also can recognize that as it gets discussed, that there are two different layers. This is what Akedat Yitzchak brings that is quite instructive to those of us who don't live in the days of ancient armies. Edom, in common with many other countries, had two kinds of roads that traversed it. The one used by armies would be far away from the built-up areas so as to ensure that whoever traveled that route would not cause damage or interfere with either agriculture or civilization. Now, like I said, that is for your own native armies, let alone for foreigners. These were just major trails that an army could travel that would be away from the towns and away from the major population centers to try and avoid the difficulties that we discussed near the beginning of this class. Now, there is a comparable thing in modern America, although we've kind of flipped it. We built interstate highways in the middle of the 20th century in order to move armies around. That was the primary purpose. Eisenhower, when he became president, had seen the incredible importance of good roads in Germany for moving around the German forces and wanted something comparable in the United States. And the interstates were there not just to facilitate commerce in a broad sense, but also to move troops around rapidly. God forbid we should ever need so, but important if we did. And they weren't meant to be in the middle of major metropolitan areas. They were meant to link those areas, but not like right down the downtown. Well, unfortunately, we have kind of flipped that in the US, where now we have a lot of freeways through the downtown. But if they weren't supposed to be downtown, well, what are the other roads? Well, as Akedat Yitzchak points out, the other road, the non-highway, they were the paved main highway. These were where all your carts were going. This was where the people on the donkeys were going, your camel caravans were going. And it was better maintained because that was your day-to-day activity, unlike the army, which would happen, at worst, a few times a year. And that was the link between the built-up areas. On that route would be found suppliers of water and food for travelers. Israel first offered to travel the first kind of road. So we recognize this is your land, we just want to pass through. Seir says no. When they refused, Israel suggested using the other type of road, offering economic benefits to the host country by using and paying for the facilities available. Okay, so next line says, don't take anything without paying for it. That wasn't just an additional element to the first suggestion, says Akedat Yitzchak. That was actually a second major change, saying we'll use the other road. And that means we won't just be wafting through your land, we will actually be providing economic benefit as well. So that means in the latter event, they wanted to reassure Edom that they would not cause destruction or damage in their wake, something the Edomites had reason to be afraid of, considering the size of Israel's army. Again, the worries of Edom, of Seir, of Esau's children were legitimate. These were very natural concerns to have if you had any understanding of how the world worked in the ancient world, even in the modern world. So the diplomacy was necessary in order to tap down the frustration of the Israelites but it was also necessary to show the Israelites, one, that diplomacy is important. Even if it might not work out, you still have to try. And famously, Deuteronomy will later tell us that even in war, we have to offer peace to a city before attacking, even when they are already our enemies. And of course, this is also telling us that if we were able to go through, what the dictates of that diplomacy would be, and it would, of course, be to do no harm, and if possible, to do benefit. All right, let's go ahead and march onward to see more of what we can learn from this that might be applicable to us in our day-to-day life. Obviously, many of us are not diplomats. However, I will remind you that in our interpersonal connections with many, sometimes it is often overlooked. That is to say, the power of diplomacy is overlooked. We think we know what the other person is going to answer, and so we don't bother. We think that they're going to say no, and so we don't even ask, or we think they'll say no, and so we just take and deal with the fallout afterwards. This is trying to indicate that that is not the correct behavior for a good person. You begin with diplomacy. Diplomacy fails. You try to adjust to see if you can find a resolution that will be suitable for everybody involved. And if that doesn't work out, then depending upon the circumstance, if you have another way to go, then you have to respect the other person and go the other way. It would only be if there was a unavoidable conflict that you cannot find another path through, that you would then escalate into more confrontation. But confrontation does not have to happen, and it especially shouldn't happen if we haven't exhausted the alternatives. Now, as Rabbeinu Bachya here is going to remind us, especially in this time, those alternatives were very important. God reminds the people that although these people are descended from Esau, which was not exactly the good brother of Jacob, there were many problems between them. Nonetheless, they are still to be considered your brother. These are the Achim. These are the brothers of our people, even if they're not in the Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel, the direct tribes of Jacob. They are our uncle and thus cousins. And the phrase brother, can be more than just people that you happen to grow up with in the same household. And that means we have an especially strong obligation to leave them alone if that is the only resolution to the situation. Now, that is not just for that. As Rashbam points out, there are additional teachings for the Israelites other than just don't mess with people that you shouldn't mess with because it's not nice. But also, Moses had to mention all these warnings, meaning about the don't take from their land and go around them because it is their land and all of that. Now, do it now so that the people would not become faint-hearted and say that if God had wanted to give their land to us and he had been able to do so, why did he not first let us conquer the lands which are in our path instead of making us detour around these countries? So the perfectly reasonable paranoid fears of the Israelites would have been, wait a minute, we're going to go to Israel, Canaan at the time, and we're going to fight the Canaanites and all of the other people that live there, who have giant walled cities and large armies, and in some cases more advanced technology like the iron chariots and all of that. But we can't handle these semi-nomadic people of Edom, of Esau's descendants. I mean, if we can't handle these people, how are we going to handle the people of Canaan? Says God through Moses and through the explanation that this is a country you are not meant to stir yourself up and fight. It means that, look, yes, you could fight these people and you would win because God is on your side, but God does not want you to fight these people because God has not made the promise to you to give this land to you. God has made the promise to them that they can live in peace without fear from the children of Israel in their own land, that the Edomites, the Moabites get to live without worry of us, even when it's inconvenient to us. And they are our brothers, and thus we should respect the fact that they are due their inheritance the same way we are due our inheritance. So Moses told the people that God did not want these peoples to be deprived of their lands. And as we're going to see, Rashba will build off this concept, and he will try to show how that is something that should make us feel more strengthened in our courage and in our faith. That when God says, you are not allowed to take the Edomite land, that is something that should not just make us feel proud to have a God that believes that people should live in peace, but that is something that should also make us feel better about our chances to live at peace for ourselves. As he continues, Mount Seir had been assigned as an ancestral land to descendants of Esau. The Ammonites and the Moabites had been assigned to their land as a courtesy to Abraham, whom they were related to biologically through Lot. Moses also wanted the people to understand that seeing that God was so concerned with distant relatives of Abraham, I mean, really, these are like, second cousin once removed, or whatever the technical genealogical term would be, how much more concerned would he be about the direct descendants of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, meaning the Israelites, us? He would most certainly keep a promise made to these patriarchs in the form of an oath. So Rashbam is saying, when God is defending the rights of the children of Esau and the children of Lot, he is also reminding the Israelites that he will defend them as well. That if God is willing to defend these more distant relations and the integrity of their claim to their land, then certainly God is willing to defend the integrity of our claim to our land. So by respecting the sovereignty of these nations, we are reinforcing our own belief that the sovereignty of our nation, of our people, should and will also be respected. It's the reciprocity that creates a stronger feeling. And finally today, I think I overcompensated going a bit faster, trying to make up for missing time. Hopefully you all know you can slow things down if you're watching this on YouTube if you missed anything, and always contact me if you have questions. But I wanted to finish with a concept that comes out of this as well as many other aspects of Torah that is found in Shmona Prakim, the 8 chapters of Rambam. If you've never read this very, very small, really pamphlet more than a book, it is a wonderful exercise with some many amazing insights for our own personal direction in Jewish life. It's not a hard test. This is not a text. This is not Moreh Nevuchim, Guide for the Perplexed. It is certainly not as long as Mishnah Torah, his great legal code, but it is a much more accessible text. And here is just a small portion where he is trying to help us understand what we can learn for ourselves personally, spiritually, psychologically, emotionally, from the commandments in general. And some specifics too. The law, meaning the Torah, did not lay down its commandments except that by its effects we may maintain the proper distance from extremes. All right. This is a rather strong statement and one that others may take issue with, but for the moment, allow it to sort of, seep into you and taste it for what he's trying to say, which is to say that the commandments do not fulfill some other esoteric purpose. The commandments were given for us in order that we would know the correct derech, the correct path that we are meant to walk, just like our ancestors here in the wilderness, and that would be then for our benefit. For example, the restrictions regarding all the forbidden foods, the prohibitions on illicit intercourse, the forewarnings against prostitution, the duty of performing the legal marriage rites, all of these God commanded in order that we should keep distant from the extreme of inordinate indulgence of the passions, so that there may be firmly rooted in our souls the disposition for moderation. So, because we have these prohibitions, and when we exercise the self-control that is needed in order to refrain from non-kosher food or to refrain from illicit intimate encounters and all of the other things mentioned, we are actually strengthening our ability to walk in a path of moderation, to say to our passions, no. Not to say that we don't allow ourselves to enjoy, because after all, there are permitted ways to enjoy our passion, but we are going to only enjoy our passion within that slightly narrower path. We are not going to wander into the fields all around us and just rob people like a marauding army. We will walk down the narrow road, and we will properly pay for what we need and only take it when it is being given with consent. By the way, that doesn't count for the intimate relations, as the text makes clear. But in general, the metaphor applies, that we will only walk and enjoy the fruits of the world in a way that is appropriate. And all of these additional mitzvot help teach us that discipline necessary to walk that path, even when our passion tells us we want something that is forbidden. Likewise, the giving of tithes, the gleaning of the harvest, the forgotten sheaves, the single grapes, and the small bunches in the vineyard for the poor. These are all technical terms for different agricultural rules that allow people to feed themselves even though they are poor. The laws of the sabbatical year and of the Jubilee, with the remission of debts, the freeing of people who are indentured, and the giving of tzedakah, charity if you wish, according to the wants of the needy. All of this instills in us the quality of generosity, so that we are, by following these commandments, our own emotional state changes and comes closer and closer to being in a place where we feel naturally inclined towards generosity. We do not start by saying, oh, I wish you felt more generous, and if you did, you would do these good things. We start off by saying, do these things, and you will eventually feel more kind-hearted and generous. This is a standard process in Judaism, which Rambam makes explicit in a way that not many others had done. He is much clearer on this than many other writers, that the mitzvot are not just there as something that God thought might be nice, and they are not just there for the benefit that happens to a society that follows through on them. They are there because when we perform them, even when we don't feel like it, and sometimes especially when we don't feel like it, we will eventually come to shape our own heart and feelings into a better version of ourselves, to be more disciplined, to be more generous, or, as he goes on to say, that if you should test most of the commandments from this point of view, meaning think of any other commandment and imagine what it can be teaching you about that sense of moral balance, you would find that they are all from the discipline and guidance of the faculties of the soul. Likewise, the law forbids revenge, the bearing of a grudge or blood revenge. These commandments are intended to weaken the force of wrath or anger. And of course, he goes on in much more detail in the full book. So Rambam leads us by reminding us that this seemingly small digression and diversion that is found here in Deuteronomy is actually trying to remind us of some of the emotional and moral characteristics that we should be aspiring to. That these virtues of discipline and of distance from anger and generosity are things that are grown through the observance of the mitzvot, by either making us do things that we might otherwise not want to do, or by limiting us from doing things that we might otherwise feel like we want to do. And that by allowing ourselves to continue to live according to this derech, this path, it's not just that we are keeping the commandments, we are actually transforming ourselves into being better people overall, which allows us eventually to rise even higher than the minimum that the commandments are requesting. So when we look at detours, we realize that sometimes those detours are necessary, and even if we wanted to take the shortcut, we would be much worse off were we to do so. It certainly can make us feel a little bit more patient when we have to say no to what we want, or we have to make ourselves do things that we didn't feel like we wanted to at that moment. And through that strength, we all get better. All right, that will finish us off for today. I want to thank everybody for putting up with my technological difficulties at the beginning. Hopefully everything did work right. And I look forward to seeing you all either tonight for our continuing discussion of prayer or at any other learning or service or social activity. Take care and be well. Oh, and they also changed where the ending button is.